Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. So in this video I'll take you through what it would look like from the flight deck if we had an uncontrollable smoke and fire in the cabin leading to a ditching situation. So before I get going, if you like the video and the content, don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel. So we are just in the descent now over the North Sea, probably about 2/3 of the way between Manchester, where we left earlier, heading to Stavanger in Norway. And then unfortunately we get the call that no flight crew ever wants to hear, which is that they've got smoke coming from one of the passenger compartment areas, and the cabin crew are just working through their drills to go through it. So pilot flying would call for the smoke, fire, fumes non-normal checklist, and then also take the radios to allow pilot monitoring to carry out the non-normal checklist. First item of which, diversion may be needed. Okay, fine, well, we're in the descent towards Stavanger, we're over the North Sea. Stavanger is still probably the best option for us. We get our oxygen masks on the left, and then we need to make sure the audio panel is configured to allow us to have communications. So pilot monitoring will then continue to work through the checklist, keeping both crew members involved. The aim of the checklist at this stage is basically to isolate the electrical systems to alleviate their fire risk, and then also just adjust the pressurization system such that it keeps the cabin as hospitable as possible. So whilst the pilot monitoring is doing that, the pilot flying will be thinking pretty seriously that they've probably only got about 17 minutes before an uncontrolled fire on board becomes completely catastrophic. So pilot flying will be thinking, how best can I get the aircraft on the ground as quickly as possible? And what I do here, you see me via the MCP panel dial on near enough the maximum speed. We can go and extend the speed brake just to increase our rate of descent and get us going towards the ground. At this point, pilot flying would also take the opportunity to put a mayday out at least, and get the assistance of air traffic units, and in fact probably negotiate a direct routing to the closest alternate airport. Just passing 20,000 feet now, and we've just had communication from the cabin that the problem's getting worse, the smoke's getting thicker, people are coughing, and they've in fact had to move passengers away to a different part of the aircraft. So the tactic changes for us now in the flight deck. Two major things. It's becoming increasingly clear that we're probably not going to make it to Stavanger, so we're starting to get ditching to the forefront of our mind. And also, the big priority now becomes removal of the fumes from the cabin. So with that, pilot monitoring will then start the smoke removal checklist. So pilot monitoring will get working straight away on that checklist, and that checklist is aimed at using the pressurization and air conditioning system on the aircraft to try and evacuate as much of the smoke as possible to improve the environmental situation. So we've just had word back from the cabin once again that in fact the situation's got a lot worse now. People are struggling to breathe, so despite our best efforts we've just not been able to solve the problem. So we've now having to abandon the smoke, fire, fumes removal checklist, and we're now concentrating our efforts on ditching the aircraft. Two big changes now here to the aircraft. Previously we were trying to get smoke out of it. Now we want to make the aircraft nice and watertight, so it gives people as long as possible to get off the aircraft before it fills up with water. So pilot flying is chiefly concerned now with slowing the aircraft down, both in speed and also rate of descent, and the pilot monitoring working through the ditching checklist, the sent distress signal. He or she's briefed the cabin crew, and now they're figuring out which way the wind's blowing to try and get the smoothest possible touchdown. So during this time, the pilot flying has had the aircraft configured, ready for the ditching process. The ditching procedure has been reviewed, and it's beginning to look pretty real now. As you look outside, you can start to see the waves forming outside the aircraft. You're getting a lot of the warnings from the aircraft. You can see red there written, pull up, pull up, pull up. This is very unnatural. So all the minds are pretty much concentrated. About 500 feet, the cabin crew advise that ditching is imminent, and then at 50 feet, the command is given for the cabin crew to brace for impact. For the final little bit, the pilot flying is concentrating on keeping a nice shallow rate of descent and flying at the appropriate moment to give a nice smooth touchdown to minimize the impact damage.